The Willow Creek Animal Shelter sat on the edge of town, its rusted fences and weathered sign bathed in the soft glow of a Montana sunset. Ethan Carter, 37, a former Special Forces soldier with a rugged frame and haunted blue eyes, walked slowly toward the entrance, his worn combat boots crunching against the gravel. 2 years out of the Army, Ethan was a shadow of the man he'd been, his days haunted by PTSD and the ghosts of missions gone wrong. His German Shepherd, Shadow, had been his anchor in those dark times, a 4-year-old war dog who'd saved his life more than once. But after a roadside bomb ended their service, Shadow was retired, and Ethan hadn't seen him since. Inside, the shelter smelled of disinfectant and wet fur, the air filled with the soft whines and barks of abandoned dogs. Ethan's sister, Claire Harper, a nurse with a stubborn streak, had pushed him to come here, insisting a dog could help fill the void in his heart. Ethan wasn't convinced, but something, maybe desperation, maybe hope, had dragged him through the door. Mr. Carter? Sam Rivera, a wiry shelter worker in his late 20s, approached, wiping his hands on a rag. Claire said you might be looking for a companion. We've got some great dogs here. Ethan nodded, his voice gruff. Just show me around. Sam led him through the narrow aisles, past cages of eager mutts and quiet strays. Ethan scanned each dog, his soldier's instincts sizing them up. Some wagged their tails, others cowered, but none sparked the connection he'd felt with Shadow. He was about to turn back when Sam paused, his tone cautious. We've got one more. A German Shepherd came in a few weeks ago. He's different. Ethan's heart skipped, a flicker of hope igniting. Show me. Sam hesitated, then led him to a secluded corner of the shelter, where a single cage sat under a dim bulb. Inside, a large German Shepherd with black and tan fur lay curled in the shadows, his body stiff, his eyes dull with weariness. Scars marked his flank and ear, battle wounds Ethan knew too well. His breath caught, his voice barely a whisper. Shadow? The dog lifted his head, his gaze meeting Ethan's, but there was no recognition, no spark. Just a cold, empty stare, like Ethan was a stranger. Ethan's chest tightened, a wave of grief crashing over him. It's me, buddy, he said, kneeling, his voice cracking. Don't you remember? Shadow didn't move, didn't wag his tail, didn't even blink. Sam shifted uncomfortably. He's been through a lot. Found at a shelter in Idaho, no records, doesn't trust anyone. Ethan's hands gripped the cage bars, his knuckles white. This is my dog, he said, his voice raw. We served together. He saved my life. Sam's eyes widened, but before he could respond, Shadow let out a low growl, his hackles rising as he backed deeper into the cage. Ethan flinched, the rejection cutting deeper than any wound. Shadow, it's me, he pleaded, his voice breaking. Please. The dog's growl faded, but his eyes remained distant, unyielding. Ethan stood, his heart splintering, but a fire kindled in his gut. He wouldn't abandon Shadow, not after everything they'd been through. I'm taking him home, he told Sam, his tone resolute. No matter what it takes. Sam nodded, unlocking the cage. He's yours. But Ethan, he might not come back the way you hope. As Sam led Shadow out, Ethan noticed something glint in the cage's corner, a small battered military tag, half buried in the straw. He picked it up, his blood running cold. It wasn't Shadow's tag. It bore a code. Project Sentinel. Ethan's mind raced. Shadow hadn't been retired to a family. He'd been taken somewhere, experimented on, broken. And someone had left this tag as a message. "Ethan!" Sam called, holding Shadow's leash. "You okay?" Ethan pocketed the tag, his voice steady but laced with fury. "Yeah, let's go." Shadow followed, his movements mechanical, his eyes never meeting Ethan's. As they stepped into the fading light, Ethan's resolve hardened. He'd bring Shadow back, no matter the cost. But the tag in his pocket whispered a darker truth. Someone, or something, didn't want this reunion to happen, and they were watching. The Montana sky burned orange over Willow Creek, a quiet town nestled among rolling hills, its streets lined with weathered storefronts and pickup trucks. 2 years ago, before the shelter, Ethan Carter was a different man, a Special Forces soldier, lean and focused, his blue eyes sharp with purpose. Shadow, his 4-year-old German shepherd, was his shadow in every sense, a war dog trained to sniff out explosives and track enemies. Together they'd faced hell in dusty outposts, Shadow's instincts saving Ethan from ambushes and IEDs. But a bomb in their final mission had ended it all. Ethan discharged with a limp, Shadow retired to an unknown fate. Now Ethan lived on the town's edge, in a small cabin that felt more like a cage. PTSD woke him with nightmares, his days filled with odd jobs and silence. His sister, Claire Harper, a nurse with a warm smile and relentless optimism, was the only one who hadn't given up on him. She'd pushed him to visit the Willow Creek Animal Shelter, swearing a dog could pull him out of the dark. Ethan had scoffed, but the memory of Shadow, his loyal partner, had nudged him forward. Back then, Ethan's life had purpose. He and Shadow trained relentlessly, their bond forged in sweat and trust. Ethan could still feel the weight of Shadow's muzzle against his hand, the dog's steady gaze calming him in the chaos of war. But the army had torn them apart, and Ethan's calls to track Shadow down led nowhere. Retired to a good home, they'd said. He'd believed it, until yesterday. The shelter's image haunted him. The rusted cage, Shadow's scarred flank, his empty eyes. Ethan sat on his cabin's porch, the military tag from Shadow's cage clenched in his fist. Project Sentinel. The code meant nothing, but its presence screamed trouble. Shadow hadn't been retired to a family. Someone had taken him, broken him, and left that tag as a warning or a taunt. Claire's pickup rumbled into the driveway, her blonde hair tied back, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. She stepped out, her eyes narrowing as she saw Ethan's expression. "You look like hell, Ethan," she said, climbing the porch steps. "How's Shadow?" Ethan's jaw tightened, his voice low. "He doesn't know me, Claire. My own dog looked at me like I was nothing." Claire's face softened, her hand resting on his shoulder. "He's been through a lot, just like you. Give him time." Ethan opened his hand, revealing the tag. This was in his cage. Project Sentinel. You ever hear of it? Claire frowned, taking the tag, her fingers tracing the engraved code. "No, but it sounds military." "Ethan, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking someone did this to him," Ethan said, his voice raw. Shadow wasn't abandoned by some family. He was used. And they didn't want me finding him. Claire's eyes widened, but she shook her head. "You're jumping to conclusions. Maybe it's just a mix-up." Ethan stood, pacing, his boots thudding against the wood. "A mix-up doesn't leave a military tag in a shelter cage. Someone's covering their tracks, Claire, and I'm gonna find out who." Inside, Shadow lay in the corner of the living room, his black and tan coat dull under the lamplight. Ethan had set up a dog bed, bowls, and toys, but Shadow ignored them, his body curled tight, his eyes fixed on the wall. Ethan knelt a few feet away, his voice soft. "Hey, buddy. I know you're scared, but it's me. We're in this together." Shadow's ears twitched, but he didn't move, his silence a knife in Ethan's chest. Ethan's mind flashed to their last mission, the explosion, Shadow's yelp, the medics pulling them apart. He'd failed Shadow then, and now he was failing him again. Claire watched from the doorway, her voice gentle but firm. "Ethan, you can't fix him overnight. He's got his own demons, just like you." Ethan's eyes burned, but he nodded. "I owe him, Claire. He never left my side, not once. I'm not giving up on him." As Claire stepped outside to take a call, Ethan noticed Shadow's head lift, his nose sniffing the air. The dog's gaze darted to the window, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Ethan froze, his soldier's instincts kicking in. He moved to the window, peering into the dusk. A black SUV idled across the street, its windows tinted, its engine humming. Ethan's pulse quickened. Willow Creek wasn't a place for strangers to linger. "Shadow, stay," Ethan whispered, grabbing his old service pistol from a drawer. He stepped onto the porch, the SUV's headlights flaring before it peeled away, tires screeching. Ethan's grip tightened on the gun, his mind racing. That wasn't a coincidence. Back inside, Shadow was on his feet, his growl louder, his eyes locked on the door. Ethan knelt beside him, his voice steady but urgent. "You felt it too, didn't you, boy? Someone's watching us." In Shadow's cage at the shelter, Ethan had missed something. A tiny folded note tucked under the straw, now lying unnoticed on his cabin floor. It read, "Keep him close. They're coming." The tag wasn't just a clue. It was a beacon, and Ethan had just walked into a trap he didn't yet understand. The morning mist hung low over Willow Creek, Montana, blanketing Ethan Carter's cabin in a ghostly haze. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of coffee and the faint musk of dog fur. Ethan, 37, sat at his kitchen table, his rugged frame tense, his blue eyes fixed on the military tag from Shadow's shelter cage. Project Sentinel. The words gnawed at him, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Shadow, his 4-year-old German shepherd, lay in the corner, his black and tan coat dull, his scarred body curled tight. The dog's empty stare still cut Ethan deep, a reminder of the bond they'd lost. But the black SUV from last night, idling outside his house, had lit a fire in him. Someone was watching, and Ethan wasn't about to let them near Shadow. He'd barely slept, his PTSD-fueled nightmares now mixed with new fears. Shadow's growls at the window, the tag's cryptic code, it all pointed to something darker than a simple shelter mix-up. Ethan's sister, Claire Harper, had brushed it off as paranoia, but Ethan knew better. He'd seen too much in the army to ignore his instincts. Shadow stirred, his ears twitching as a low growl rumbled in his throat. Ethan followed the dog's gaze to the front door, where a faint scratching sound broke the silence. His hand went to the service pistol on the table, his pulse quickening. "Easy, boy," he whispered, rising slowly. Shadow stood, his hackles up, his eyes locked on the door. Ethan crept forward, gun ready, and eased the door open. No one was there, but a small folded note lay on the porch, its edges damp from the mist. He snatched it up, his heart pounding as he read the scrawled words. Keep him close. They're coming. The handwriting was shaky, urgent, like a warning from someone on the run. Ethan's mind raced. Who left this? And who were they? Back inside, Shadow paced, his growl deepening, as if sensing a threat Ethan couldn't see. Ethan tucked the note into his pocket next to the Project Sentinel tag. You know something's off, don't you, buddy? He said, kneeling beside the dog. Shadow's nose brushed Ethan's hand, a fleeting touch that sparked a flicker of hope. It wasn't recognition, but it was something. The cabin's phone rang, shattering the tension. Ethan grabbed it, his voice gruff. Yeah? Ethan, it's Sam, came the voice of Sam Rivera, the shelter worker. You need to get down here. I found something in Shadow's old cage. Paperwork, hidden under the floor. It's weird. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. Weird how? Just come, Sam said, his tone uneasy. And bring Shadow. I don't trust this place right now. Ethan hung up, his mind churning. Paperwork. Hidden? He glanced at Shadow, who was now sniffing the floor near the couch, his nose zeroing in on a loose board. Ethan frowned, prying it up with a knife. Beneath was a small metal case, no bigger than a wallet, its surface etched with the same Project Sentinel code. Inside, a microchip and a folded map marked with coordinates in the Montana wilderness. Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't random. Someone had planted this in his home. Shadow, Ethan said, his voice low, urgent. We're moving. The shelter was quiet when Ethan arrived. Shadow on a leash, the dog's movements stiff but alert. Sam met them at the entrance, his dark eyes darting nervously. In here, he said, leading them to a back office cluttered with files and dog treats. On the desk was a torn envelope, its contents spilled out. A single page with military letterhead, stamped classified. The words, Project Sentinel, Canine Enhancement, jumped out, followed by a list of dog IDs, Shadows among them. Ethan's voice was steel. What the hell is this, Sam? Sam swallowed, his hands shaking. I found it under Shadow's cage after you left. It's some kind of experiment, training dogs for, I don't know, mind control or something. Look at this. He pointed to a line. Subject 47, Shadow, transferred to Black Site 9. Termination scheduled. Ethan's heart stopped. Termination. Shadow hadn't been retired. He'd been sent to a secret facility, marked for death. Who did this? He demanded, his voice rising. Sam shook his head. I don't know, but someone's been calling the shelter, asking about Shadow. I didn't say anything, I swear. Shadow growled, his nose twitching, and he bolted toward the office door, barking furiously. Ethan spun, gun drawn, just as the door burst open. A man in a black tactical vest stood there, his face obscured by a balaclava, a silenced pistol aimed at Ethan. Hand over the dog, he growled, or you're both dead. Ethan dove behind the desk, pulling Sam with him as a bullet splintered the wood. Shadow lunged, his jaws clamping onto the man's arm. The attacker screamed, his gun firing wild, shattering a window. Ethan tackled him, wrenching the pistol free and pinning him down. Who sent you? Ethan roared, his knee on the man's chest. The attacker smirked, blood trickling from his lip. You're digging your own grave, Carter. Sentinel's bigger than you know. Shadow's growl deepened, his teeth inches from the man's throat. Ethan zip-tied his wrists. his mind racing. Sentinel wasn't just a program, it was a machine, and Shadow was a loose end. But the real shock came when Ethan searched the man's pocket, finding a photo. Ethan and Shadow in Afghanistan, taken during their last mission. Someone had been tracking them for years. "Ethan!" Sam shouted, pointing to the window. Headlights flared outside, more vehicles, closing in fast. Ethan grabbed the classified page, stuffing it into his jacket. "We're out of time," he said, whistling for Shadow. The dog sprinted to his side, still growling, his instincts sharp despite his trauma. As they fled through a back exit, Ethan's thoughts churned. The note, the microchip, the photo. Someone was orchestrating this, pulling strings from the shadows. And Shadow, the dog who'd once been his brother in arms, was the key. Ethan glanced at the German shepherd, his voice thick with resolve. "I don't know what they did to you, buddy, but I'm getting you back, and I'm gonna make them pay." The shelter's lights flickered as engines roared closer, a chilling reminder that Project Sentinel wasn't done with them. And neither was the person who'd left that note. The Willow Creek night was thick with tension, the Montana stars hidden behind a shroud of clouds. Ethan Carter's cabin, a sanctuary on the town's edge, felt like a trap after the shelter attack. Ethan, 37, sat on the floor, his rugged frame hunched, his blue eyes scanning the classified Project Sentinel document he'd taken from Sam Rivera's office. The words, "canine enhancement" and "termination scheduled," burned in his mind, each line a betrayal of Shadow, his 4-year-old German shepherd. The dog lay nearby, his black and tan coat scarred, his eyes distant, still a stranger despite the fleeting moments of connection. The microchip and map from the cabin's floorboard, the note warning, "They're coming," and the photo of Ethan and Shadow in Afghanistan, all pointed to a conspiracy that had broken his partner and now hunted them both. Ethan's hand tightened around his service pistol, the memory of the balaclava-clad attacker's words. "Sentinel's bigger than you know," fueling his anger. Shadow's low growl pulled him back, the dog's ears perked, his nose sniffing the air. Ethan followed his gaze to the window where headlights flickered through the trees. "Not again," he muttered, standing, his heart pounding. "Shadow, with me." The German shepherd rose, his movements stiff but alert, his training kicking in despite his trauma. Ethan grabbed the document, microchip, and map, stuffing them into a backpack. He opened the back door, peering into the dark. 2 black SUVs idled on the road, their engines a low hum. Ethan's soldier instinct screamed ambush, but before he could move, a deafening explosion rocked the cabin. The front wall erupted in flames, glass shattering, the blast throwing Ethan and Shadow to the floor. "Shadow!" Ethan shouted, coughing through the smoke, his ears ringing. The dog scrambled to his feet, barking furiously, his hackles up. Ethan crawled to him, checking for injuries. Shadow's flank was singed, but he was unharmed, his eyes flashing with a spark Ethan hadn't seen since Afghanistan. "Good boy," Ethan said, his voice hoarse, gripping the dog's collar. Gunfire erupted outside, bullets tearing through the burning walls. Ethan dove behind the couch, pulling Shadow with him. "Stay low, buddy," he whispered, returning fire through a broken window. Shadows moved in the dark, 3, maybe 4 attackers, their tactical gear glinting under the firelight. Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't a warning. They wanted Shadow dead, and him with it. The cabin groaned, flames licking the ceiling. Ethan grabbed the backpack, slinging it over his shoulder. "We're out of here," he said, whistling sharply. Shadow bolted toward the back door, leading the way as Ethan followed, firing to cover their escape. They burst into the yard, the cold air a shock after the heat. Ethan sprinted for the woods, Shadow at his side, but a figure stepped from the trees, a man in a tailored coat, his face hard, his gray hair cropped military style. Colonel James Vaughn, Ethan's former commanding officer, held a pistol, his expression cold. "Ethan," Vaughn said, his voice calm but lethal. "You should have left the dog alone." Ethan froze, his gun trained on Vaughn, Shadow growling beside him. "You did this to him," Ethan spat, his voice raw. "Sentinel, what the hell is it?" "Why, Shadow?" Vaughn's smile was thin, predatory. "Sentinel was progress, enhanced canines, perfect soldiers. Shadow was our prototype, but he failed, too loyal to you." Ethan's blood boiled, his grip tightening. "You broke him." "For what? Some sick experiment?" "War demands sacrifice," Vaughn said, stepping closer, his gun steady. "Hand him over, Ethan. Walk away, or you're both terminated." Shadow's growl deepened, his body coiling, ready to strike. Ethan's mind flashed to their last mission, the bomb. Shadow's yelp, Vaughn's orders to separate them. "You sold us out," Ethan said, his voice shaking with rage. "He trusted you, and you threw him to the wolves." Vaughn's eyes narrowed. "Last chance, Carter." Before Ethan could respond, Shadow lunged, his jaws snapping at Vaughn's leg. The colonel fired, the bullet grazing Shadow's flank, but the dog didn't falter, dragging Vaughn down. Ethan tackled him, wrenching the pistol free and pinning him in the dirt. "Who's behind this?" Ethan roared, his knee on Vaughn's chest. "Who's pulling your strings?" Vaughn laughed, blood on his lips. "You think I'm the top? You're digging a grave, Carter. They'll never let you keep that dog." Footsteps crashed through the woods, Vaughn's men closing in. Ethan zip-tied Vaughn's wrists, grabbing his radio. "Shadow, come!" he called, and the dog sprinted to his side, blood seeping from his wound, but his eyes fierce. Ethan ran, the map's coordinates burning in his mind, a black site's in the Montana wilderness, where Sentinel's secrets were buried. They reached Ethan's truck, hidden in a clearing, and piled in. Ethan floored it, the cabin's flames fading in the rearview mirror. Shadow panted beside him, his injury minor but a stark reminder of the stakes. Ethan's hands shook on the wheel, Vaughn's words echoing. "They'll never let you keep that dog." But the real shock came when Ethan checked the backpack, finding a burner phone he hadn't packed. Its screen lit up with a single message. "Black Site 9. Go now. You're not alone." Ethan's stomach dropped. The note on his porch, the microchip. Now this. Someone was guiding him, but why? Friend or foe, they knew too much. He glanced at Shadow, the dog's steady gaze anchoring him. "We're in deep, buddy," Ethan said, his voice thick with resolve, "but I'm not losing you again." The truck roared into the night, headlights cutting through the mist. Behind them, Vaughn's men regrouped, their radios crackling with orders from a voice Ethan didn't yet know. A voice that held the key to Sentinel, and the chilling truth about what they'd done to Shadow. The Montana wilderness stretched endlessly before Ethan Carter's truck, a sea of pine and shadow under a moonless sky. Ethan, 37, gripped the wheel, his rugged face taut with determination, his blue eyes scanning the road. Beside him, Shadow, his 4-year-old German shepherd, panted softly, a bandage on his flank from the cabin attack. The Project Sentinel document, microchip, and map sat in Ethan's backpack, each item a piece of the puzzle that had torn Shadow from him. Colonel James Vaughan's chilling words, "Sentinels bigger than you know," echoed in Ethan's mind, but the burner phone's message, "Black Site 9, go now, you're not alone," drove him forward. Someone was guiding him, but trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Ethan glanced at Shadow, the dog's black and tan coat barely visible in the dark. "We're gonna figure this out, buddy," he said, his voice low, steady. "Whoever did this to you, they're done." Shadow's ears twitched, his gaze fixed on the road, a faint spark of his old self shining through. Ethan clung to that spark, a lifeline in the chaos. The map's coordinates pointed to a remote valley, a place no civilian should know. Ethan's Special Forces training kicked in, his instincts honed by years of covert ops. Black Site 9 wasn't just a location, it was a secret, one Vaughn had fought to protect. Ethan's cabin was ashes now, his life upended, but Shadow was alive, and that was enough to keep him moving. The truck's headlights caught a rusted gate ahead, its chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. A faded sign read, "Restricted Area." Ethan killed the engine, his heart pounding. "Stay close, Shadow," he whispered, grabbing his pistol and backpack. The dog followed, his steps silent, his nose sniffing the air. Ethan cut the gate's lock, the metal clanging softly in the still night. Beyond, a dirt path led into the valley, flanked by dense forest. As they crept forward, Shadow's hackles rose, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Ethan froze, his eyes catching a glint in the trees, a camera, its red light blinking. "They know we're here," he muttered, disabling it with a quick shot. Shadow's growl deepened, his body tensing as footsteps crunched in the distance. Ethan ducked behind a boulder, pulling Shadow with him. Two armed guards in tactical gear passed by, their radios crackling. "Perimeter's clear," one said, but Vaughn said to watch for Carter. Ethan's blood ran cold. Vaughn was free, or someone had sprung him. He waited until the guards moved on, then signaled Shadow to follow. The dog's training was still there, buried under trauma, guiding them through the dark with uncanny precision. They reached a concrete bunker half buried in the hillside, its steel door marked with the Project Sentinel logo. Ethan's stomach churned. This was where they'd taken Shadow, where they'd broken him. He picked the lock, the door creaking open to reveal a dimly lit corridor, its walls lined with monitors and lab equipment. Shadow hesitated, his growl turning to a whimper, his body trembling. Ethan knelt, his hand on the dog's neck, his voice soft but urgent. "I know this place scares you, buddy, but we're in this together. You're stronger than they know." Shadow's eyes met Ethan's, a flicker of trust breaking through. The dog stepped forward, leading the way, his nose low. Ethan followed, his pistol ready, the air thick with the hum of machinery and the faint smell of antiseptic. They reached a lab, its tables covered with vials, syringes, and computer drives. A monitor flickered, showing footage of dogs, German shepherds, like Shadow, fitted with microchips, their eyes vacant as handlers issued commands. Ethan's rage flared, his voice a whisper. "They turned you into a machine, didn't they?" He searched the lab, finding a file labeled Subject 47, Shadow. It detailed a neural implant designed to control behavior, but Shadow's had failed, his loyalty to Ethan overriding the programming. The file ended with a chilling note. Subject resistant, schedule for termination. Before Ethan could process it, Shadow's bark echoed, sharp and urgent. The dog darted to a locked cabinet, pawing at it, his teeth bared. Ethan pried it open, revealing a stack of drives and a single photo. Shadow, muzzled, strapped to a table, with a man in a lab coat standing over him. The man's face was obscured, but a name tag read Dr. E. Harris. Ethan's sister, Claire Harper, was a nurse. Could she know this Harris? The thought hit like a shockwave, sowing seeds of doubt. "Ethan, you're jumping too far," he muttered, stuffing the drives into his backpack. But Shadow's growl cut him off, the dog's nose pointing to the corridor. Boots pounded closer, guards, alerted by the breached camera. Ethan grabbed Shadow's leash, sprinting for a side exit. But the door burst open, and 3 men in tactical gear opened fire. Bullets ricocheted off the walls, shattering glass. "Shadow, go!" Ethan shouted, returning fire, his training taking over. The dog lunged, tackling one guard, his jaws clamping onto the man's arm. Ethan shot another, the third diving for cover. They bolted through the exit, emerging into the forest as alarms blared, red lights flashing across the valley. Ethan's lungs burned, Shadow's bandage seeping blood, but the dog kept pace, his instincts razor-sharp. They reached a ravine, hiding behind a fallen log as drones buzzed overhead, their searchlights slicing through the dark. Ethan checked Shadow's wound, his hands shaking. "You're tougher than they are, boy," he said, his voice thick with pride. Shadow nuzzled his hand, a brief, precious moment of connection. But the burner phone in Ethan's pocket buzzed, its screen lighting up with a new message. "You found the truth. Now run. Harris is closer than you think." Ethan's heart sank. Claire's face flashed in his mind, her insistence on the shelter, her dismissal of his fears. Was she involved, or was this another trick? He crushed the phone, his resolve hardening. "Shadow," Ethan whispered, his voice fierce. "We're not done yet. We're taking them down, together." The drones closed in, their hum growing louder, but Ethan and Shadow vanished into the trees, the lab's secrets in their hands and a chilling question in Ethan's heart. Was his own sister part of the machine that had broken his dog? The Montana dawn broke cold and gray, casting jagged shadows across the rugged terrain where Ethan, Carter, and Shadow hid. Ethan, 37, crouched in a shallow cave, his rugged frame tense, his blue eyes scanning the forest for signs of pursuit. His German shepherd, Shadow, lay beside him, his black and tan coat matted with dirt, the bandage on his flank stained from their escape from Black Site 9. The Project Sentinel. Drives and file weighed heavy in Ethan's backpack, their secrets, neural implants, Shadow's scheduled termination, Dr. E. Harris, burning in his mind. The burner phone's last message, "Harris is closer than you think," had shaken him, sowing doubt about his sister, Claire Harper. Was she tied to this nightmare, or was someone playing him? Ethan's breath fogged in the chilly air, his hand resting on Shadow's neck. The dog's steady presence grounded him, even as his PTSD clawed at the edges of his focus. "We're in deep, buddy," Ethan whispered, his voice low, raw, "but you're still with me. That's what counts." Shadow's ears twitched, his eyes flicking to the cave's entrance, a faint growl rumbling. Ethan tightened his grip on his pistol, the drone's distant hum still echoing from last night's chase. The Black Site's lab had revealed the truth. Project Sentinel wasn't just training dogs, it was rewiring them, turning loyal war dogs like Shadow into obedient machines. Shadow's implant had failed, his bond with Ethan too strong, but the cost was his memory, his trust. Ethan's rage simmered, but the photo of Dr. Harris looming over a muzzled shadow haunted him. Claire, a nurse who'd worked at a military hospital, was the only link to the name Harris. Ethan hated the suspicion, but he couldn't ignore it. Shadow's growl deepened, pulling Ethan back. The dog's nose pointed to the cave's mouth, where leaves rustled unnaturally. Ethan signaled for silence, creeping forward, pistol ready. A figure emerged from the trees, Lila Brooks, a wiry hacker in her late 20s, her dark hair tucked under a beanie. Ethan had met her years ago, a tech genius who'd helped his unit trace insurgent networks. She raised her hands, her voice low. "Easy, Carter." "It's me." Ethan lowered his gun but didn't relax. "Lila, how the hell did you find us?" Lila smirked, tossing him a burner phone. "Your mystery pen pal. I've been tracking their signals. They're sloppy, but they're connected to Sentinel." She glanced at Shadow, her expression softening. "He's tougher than he looks." Ethan caught the phone, his pulse racing. "You sent the messages?" "Nope," Lila said, crouching beside Shadow, who sniffed her cautiously. "But I intercepted them." "Someone's feeding you just enough to keep you moving. Problem is, they're leading you into a trap." Ethan's jaw tightened, Claire's face flashing in his mind. "What do you know about Dr. E. Harris?" Lila's eyes narrowed. Harris ran Sentinel's tech side, neural implants, behavioral control. Disappeared after the program tanked. "Why?" Ethan hesitated, then showed her the photo from the lab. This guy was experimenting on Shadow. "And my sister might know him." Lila whistled softly, studying the image. "That's a hell of a coincidence, Carter. But we've got bigger problems." "Those drives you took? They're encrypted, but I cracked one. Sentinel wasn't just about dogs, it was a pilot for human soldiers. And they're still active." Ethan's blood ran cold, the implications sinking in. "They're coming for Shadow to tie up loose ends." "And you," Lila said, her voice grim. "You're the only one who knows what he's worth." Shadow's sudden bark cut through their talk, his body tensing as he stared into the forest. Ethan followed his gaze, spotting movement. 3 figures in tactical gear, armed with rifles, creeping through the trees. "They're here!" Ethan hissed, grabbing his backpack. "Lila, move!" The forest erupted in gunfire, bullets splintering bark as Ethan, Shadow, and Lila dove for cover. Shadow lunged, his training kicking in, tackling one soldier with a snarl. Ethan fired, dropping another, but the third radioed for backup. "Target acquired!" the man shouted, aiming at Shadow. Lila threw a flash grenade, its blast disorienting the soldier, giving Ethan time to drag Shadow behind a tree. "Run!" Ethan yelled, sprinting with Shadow, Lila close behind. The dog's speed was uncanny, his instincts guiding them through the dense woods as drones buzzed overhead. Ethan's lungs burned, his mind racing. Sentinel wasn't just a failed experiment. It was a living, breathing machine, and Shadow was its Achilles heel. They reached an abandoned logging camp, its rusted machinery offering cover. Ethan barricaded them in a shed, Shadow panting beside him, his wound seeping again. Lila hacked into a drive, her laptop glowing. "Got something," she said, pulling up a video. Shadow, fitted with an implant, navigating a maze under Harris's watch. But another figure stood in the background, a woman, her face blurred, issuing commands. Ethan's heart stopped. The woman's posture, her blonde hair tied back. It looked like Claire. "Ethan," Lila said, her voice tense, "is that your sister?" Ethan's world tilted, betrayal cutting deep. "It can't be," he whispered. but doubt choked him. Claire had pushed him to find Shadow, dismissed his fears. Had she been steering him all along? Shadow nuzzled his hand, his growl soft as if sensing his pain. "You don't believe it, do you, boy?" Ethan said, his voice cracking. "She's family." Lila's laptop pinged. A new file, a manifest listing Sentinel's test sites, including one nearby. "If we hit this, we get Harris," Lila said. "But Ethan, if Claire's involved, you need to be ready." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening despite the ache in his chest. "I'm ready. For Shadow, for the truth." He ruffled the dog's fur, Shadow's eyes meeting his with a flicker of trust. But as they prepared to move, a faint beep echoed from Shadow's old collar, lying in Ethan's backpack. Ethan checked it, his blood running cold, a tracking signal, active since the shelter. Someone had been following them from the start, and Claire's hospital ID tucked in Ethan's wallet bore a chilling detail. Consultant, Dr. E. Harris. "They played us," Ethan said, crushing the collar, his voice a mix of rage and heartbreak. Shadow barked, ready to fight, as the sound of helicopters roared closer. The trap was closing, and Ethan's own sister might be holding the leash. The Montana forest was a labyrinth of shadow and frost, the dawn light barely piercing the canopy as Ethan Carter, Lila Brooks, and Shadow moved swiftly through the trees. Ethan, 37, his rugged frame bruised from days on the run, clutched the Project Sentinel drives, their secrets fueling his resolve. His German shepherd, Shadow, trotted beside him, the 4-year-old's black and tan coat scarred but his eyes sharper, a flicker of their old bond resurfacing. Lila, the hacker, led the way, her laptop slung over her shoulder, guiding them to a Sentinel test site from the manifest, a last chance to find Dr. E. Harris and expose the truth. But Ethan's heart was heavy, torn by the video from Black Site 9, showing a woman resembling his sister, Claire Harper, in the lab where Shadow was broken. Her hospital ID, linked to Harris, felt like a betrayal he couldn't shake. Ethan's breath fogged in the cold, his blue eyes scanning for threats. The tracking signal in Shadow's old collar, active since the shelter, had confirmed they were hunted. "Lila," Ethan said, his voice low, strained. "How much farther?" "Half a mile," Lila replied, checking her GPS. "But Ethan, if Claire's tied to Harris, we're walking into her territory." Ethan's jaw clenched, his grip tightening on his pistol. "She's my sister." "I'll handle it." Shadow growled softly, his nose twitching, sensing danger before Ethan could. The dog's instincts had saved them at the black sites, and Ethan trusted them now, even as doubt gnawed at him. Claire had pushed him to find Shadow, but her dismissal of his fears, her hospital's connection to Harris, it all pointed to a truth he didn't want to face. They reached a clearing where a derelict military outpost loomed, its concrete walls cracked, its perimeter lined with rusted barbed wire. The test site was smaller than Black Site 9, but its silence was ominous. Lila hacked the gate's keypad, the lock clicking open. "Stay sharp," she whispered, drawing a taser. Shadow led the way, his ears perked, his body low, guiding them through a maze of corridors to a central lab. Inside, monitors flickered with data, and a steel cage stood empty, its bars scratched as if by desperate claws. Ethan's stomach churned. This was where Sentinel had tested its implants. Shadow whimpered, pressing against Ethan's leg, the lab's sterile smell triggering memories of his trauma. Ethan knelt, his hand on the dog's neck, his voice soft but fierce. "You're safe now, buddy. They can't touch you. Lila plugged her laptop into a terminal, her fingers flying. Got a hit, she said, pulling up a file. Sentinel Phase 2, Human Trials. It listed soldiers fitted with neural implants, their names redacted, but one detail stood out. Oversight, Dr. E. Harris, C. Harper. Ethan's heart stopped, Claire's name glaring from the screen. Ethan, Lila said, her voice tense. This is bad. Claire wasn't just a nurse. She consulted on Sentinel's medical protocols. Ethan's world tilted, his voice a raw whisper. She knew what they were doing to Shadow. Before Lila could answer, Shadow's bark echoed, sharp and urgent. The dog darted to a side door, pawing at it, his teeth bared. Ethan kicked it open, revealing a storage room filled with crates and a single, locked safe. Shadow's nose zeroed in on the safe, his growl deepening. Ethan cracked it open, finding a hard drive labeled Phase 2 Data, and a photo. Claire, younger, standing beside Dr. E. Harris, a stern man in a lab coat, at a military facility. Scrawled on the back was a note. She tried to stop it. Ethan's knees buckled, confusion and rage colliding. Stop what? He muttered, but Shadow's sudden lunge pulled him back. The dog tackled a figure emerging from the shadows, a man in black tactical gear, his knife gleaming. Ethan fired, dropping him, but more boots pounded in the corridor. Lila, we're compromised, he shouted, grabbing the hard drive. Lila slammed her laptop shut, her taser sparking. They've been tracking us since the black sites. Move! They sprinted through the lab, Shadow leading, his instincts navigating the maze as gunfire erupted behind them. Ethan returned fire, his training seamless. But a bullet grazed his arm, blood seeping through his jacket. Shadow growled, staying close, his loyalty unwavering. They burst into the clearing, only to find Claire standing by the gate, her blonde hair tied back, her nurse's scrubs stark against the gray dawn. A pistol hung at her side, her face pale but resolute. "Ethan, stop!" Claire called, her voice trembling. "You don't understand." Ethan aimed his gun, his heart breaking, Shadow growling beside him. "Understand what, Claire? That you helped them break my dog? That you're working with Harris?" Claire's eyes filled with tears, her hands raised. "I didn't know, Ethan. I was a nurse, consulting on soldier recovery. Harris used me, used my access to hide Sentinel's trials. When I found out, I tried to shut it down. That's why they took Shadow, to punish me." Ethan's grip faltered, her words cutting through his doubt. "Then why didn't you tell me?" he roared, his voice cracking. "He's my partner, Claire. You let them destroy him." Shadow pressed against Ethan's leg, his growl softening, as if sensing Claire's truth. Lila stepped forward, her taser ready. "Ethan, she's telling the truth. The note on the photo, she tried to stop it, but we're out of time." Helicopters roared overhead, their searchlights slicing through the trees. Ethan lowered his gun, his voice raw. "Claire, if you're lying, I'll never forgive you." "I'm not," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "I swear, Ethan. I've been feeding you the notes, the tag, the phone. I couldn't face you after what I let happen." The twist hit Ethan like a shockwave. Claire was the tipster, guiding him to expose Sentinel, risking her life to atone. But before he could respond, a sniper's bullet cracked through the air, grazing Claire's shoulder. She cried out, collapsing as Ethan dove to cover her, Shadow barking furiously. Lila fired her taser at a rooftop shadow, buying them seconds. "Ethan, go!" Claire gasped, clutching her wound. "The hard drive. It's everything. Get it to the press." Ethan hesitated, his heart torn, but Shadow's nudge pushed him forward. He grabbed Claire's arm, pulling her with them as they sprinted for the trees, Lila covering their retreat. The helicopters closed in, their rotors deafening, but Shadow's instincts led them to a hidden ravine, out of sight. Ethan's mind churned. Claire's betrayal was a lie, but her guilt was real, and Harris, still out there, was tightening the noose. "Claire," Ethan said, his voice thick with pain, "you should have trusted me." "I know," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. "But I'm here now. For you." "For Shadow." Shadow growled, ready to fight, as the searchlights swept closer. Ethan's resolve hardened. He'd protect his sister, his dog, and the truth, no matter the cost. The Montana night was a cloak of shadows, the air sharp with the scent of pine and gunpowder. Ethan Carter, Lila Brooks, Claire Harper, and Shadow crouched in a ravine outside Willow Creek, the roar of helicopters fading as their pursuers lost the trail. Ethan, 37, his rugged frame battered, clutched the Project Sentinel hard drive, its secrets, neural implants, human trials, Dr. E. Harris's experiments, burning in his hands. Shadow, his 4-year-old German shepherd, pressed against his side. The dog's black and tan coat scarred, but his eyes fierce, their bond reigniting through shared danger. Claire, Ethan's sister, clutched her grazed shoulder, her nurse's scrubs bloodied, her confession as the tipster still ringing in Ethan's ears. Lila, the hacker, scanned her laptop, tracking Sentinel's signals, her face grim. Ethan's blue eyes darted to the horizon, his voice low, raw. "Claire, you should have told me from the start." "Shadow paid the price for your silence." Claire's tear-streaked face met his, her voice trembling. "I thought I was protecting you, Ethan. Harris threatened to kill you if I talked. I fed you the notes to keep you safe." Ethan's jaw tightened, forgiveness warring with betrayal. Shadow nuzzled his hand, a soft whine grounding him. "We're past that now," he said, his tone firm but softer. "But we end this tonight, for Shadow." Lila looked up, her voice urgent. "The hard drive's data points to a Sentinel facility, old airfield, 10 miles out. Harris is there, overseeing a final shipment of implants. If we hit it, we expose everything." Ethan nodded, his resolve ironclad. "Then we move." "Lila, can you get this to the press?" "Already uploading," Lila said, her fingers flying. "But we need to be there to stop Harris. He's got mercenaries, Ethan. Ex-military like you." Shadow growled, sensing the stakes, his instincts razor-sharp. Ethan ruffled his fur, his voice thick. "You ready, buddy?" "One last mission." Shadow's tail flicked, a spark of their old partnership flaring. The airfield was a ghost of its former self, its runways cracked, its hangars rusted under the moonlight. Ethan, Claire, Lila, and Shadow approached through a dry riverbed, avoiding drones patrolling the perimeter. Ethan's Special Forces training guided them, Shadow's nose sniffing out traps. They reached a hangar, its doors ajar, revealing crates stacked high, implants ready for distribution. Inside, Colonel James Vaughn stood with Dr. E. Harris, a gaunt man in his 50s, his lab coat pristine despite the grime. Mercenaries patrolled, their rifles gleaming. Ethan signaled for silence, his pistol ready. "Lila, get to their server. Claire, cover her." "Shadow." With me. Claire grabbed his arm, her eyes pleading. Ethan, be careful, I can't lose you. Ethan's gaze softened, but his voice was steel. Stay sharp, Claire. We're family, but this ends now. Lila and Claire slipped toward a control room, while Ethan and Shadow crept closer to Vaughn and Harris. The colonel's voice carried, cold and commanding. Carter's here, Harris. He's got the drive. We eliminate him, the dog, and this stays buried. Harris's laugh was sharp, clinical. The dog's a failure, but Carter's persistent. His implant data could still be useful. Ethan's blood boiled, Shadow's growl mirroring his rage. They'd turned Shadow into a lab rat, and now they wanted his data. Ethan whispered, Shadow, take Vaughn. The dog's eyes locked on the colonel, his body coiling like a spring. Ethan burst from cover, firing at the mercenaries, dropping two before they could react. Shadow lunged, tackling Vaughn, his jaws clamping onto the colonel's arm. Vaughn roared, his pistol firing wild, grazing Ethan's leg. Ethan ignored the pain, tackling Harris, pinning him against a crate. You broke my dog! Ethan shouted, his voice raw. What did you do to him? Harris smirked, unyielding. We made him perfect. You're the flaw, Carter. Claire's scream cut through the chaos. Mercenaries had cornered her and Lila in the control room. Ethan hesitated, but Shadow's bark pulled him back. The dog stood over Vaughn, growling, the colonel subdued. Ethan zip-tied Harris, dragging him toward the control room, Shadow at his side. Inside, Lila fought off a mercenary with her taser, while Claire fired her stolen pistol, her hands shaking. Ethan burst in, dropping the last attacker with a precise shot. Lila, status, he called. Uploads at 90%, Lila shouted, her laptop glowing. We're live to every major news outlet. But the hangar's doors exploded inward, a black-armored figure stepping through. Major General William Kane, a name Ethan knew from his army days, a man above Vaughn. Kane's voice was ice. You're out of your depth, Carter. Sentinel's mine. Ethan's heart sank. The twist hit like a freight train. Kane, a decorated general, was the mastermind, not Harris. Shadow growled, sensing the threat. But Kane raised a remote device, its red light blinking. One signal, and your dog's implant reactivates. He'll tear you apart. Ethan's voice cracked, his gun trained on Kane. You're a soldier, Kane. How could you do this to your own? Kane's eyes were cold. Progress demands sacrifice. Sentinel's the future, humans, dogs, all controlled. You're just collateral. Claire stepped forward, her voice fierce despite her fear. It's over, Kane. The world's watching. You can't hide this. Kane laughed, but Lila's laptop pinged. Upload complete. Sirens wailed in the distance, FBI choppers closing in. Ethan seized the moment, tackling Kane, wrenching the remote free. Shadow leaped, pinning a mercenary trying to flank them, his jaws relentless. Ethan crushed the remote, his voice a roar. Shadow's mine, Kane. You're done. The FBI stormed the hangar, agents swarming, cuffing Kane, Harris, and Vaughn. Ethan knelt beside Shadow, checking his wounds, his voice thick with relief. You did it, buddy. You saved us all. Claire hugged Ethan, tears streaming. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I should have trusted you. Ethan pulled her close, his voice soft. We're good, Claire. You fought for us. Lila grinned, shutting her laptop. World's gonna know, Carter. You and Shadow are heroes. Shadow nuzzled Ethan's hand, his eyes bright. the implant's threat gone. But as Kane was dragged away, his final words chilled Ethan. "You think this ends with me?" Sentinels everywhere. Ethan's resolve hardened, Shadow's loyalty his anchor. The fight was won, but the war wasn't over. He looked at his dog, his voice steady. "We'll face it together, boy. Always." The Willow Creek sun hung high, bathing the rolling Montana hills in a golden warmth that felt like a promise of peace. Ethan Carter stood in a grassy field on the town's outskirts, his rugged frame relaxed for the first time in months, his blue eyes softened by the sight before him. Shadow, his 4-year-old German shepherd, bounded through the grass, chasing a tennis ball with a joy Ethan hadn't seen since their army days. The dog's black and tan coat gleamed, his scars a testament to their shared survival, his eyes bright with a rekindled trust. The Project Sentinel nightmare, Dr. E. Harris, Colonel James Vaughn, Major General William Kane, was behind them, exposed to the world through Lila Brooks's upload. But Kane's parting words, "Sentinels everywhere," lingered like a shadow Ethan couldn't shake. The field was home to the Willow Creek K9 Sanctuary, a new program Ethan had founded to pair rescue dogs with veterans struggling with PTSD. Named in honor of the bond he'd rebuilt with Shadow, it was a beacon of hope in a town scarred by secrets. Claire Harper, Ethan's sister, stood nearby, her blonde hair catching the breeze, her nurse's scrubs swapped for a casual jacket. Her role as the tipster, feeding Ethan clues to dismantle Sentinel, had mended their fractured trust, though the guilt of her silence still haunted her. Lila Brooks, the hacker who'd turned the tide, tinkered with a laptop at a picnic table, setting up a website for the sanctuary. Ethan tossed the ball again, Shadow leaping to catch it, his bark echoing with life. "Look at you, buddy," Ethan called, a grin breaking through his weathered features. "Back in action." He limped slightly, the graze on his leg from the airfield fight still healing, but the pain was a small price for Shadow's freedom. Claire walked over, her smile tentative, but warm. "He's really come back, Ethan. You both have." Ethan's gaze lingered on Shadow, his voice thick. "He never gave up on me, Claire. Even when they tried to break him. I owe him everything." Claire's eyes glistened, her hand brushing Ethan's arm. "I'm so sorry I kept you in the dark. I thought I was saving you, but I almost lost you both." Ethan pulled her into a hug, his voice steady but emotional. "You fought for us, Claire. That's what matters. We're family." Shadow dropped the ball at Ethan's feet, nudging his hand with a wet nose. Ethan knelt, ruffling the dog's fur, his heart full. "You're my hero, boy." "Always will be." Shadow's tail wagged, a spark of their old partnership shining through, a bond forged in war and rebuilt through patience. Lila called from the table, her voice sharp. "Ethan, you need to see this." She turned her laptop, displaying a news article, "Sentinel Scandal Rocks Pentagon." The story detailed Kane's arrest, Harris's confession, and the dismantling of Sentinel's canine program. But a line caught Ethan's eye. "Unidentified official linked to Phase 2. Human trials still at large." Ethan's stomach twisted. Kane wasn't the top, just as he'd warned. "Thought we got 'em all," Ethan said, his voice low, his hand tightening on Shadow's leash. Lila's face was grim. "Someone's covering their tracks." "I traced a signal from the airfield, encrypted, high level. Whoever's left, they're deep in the system." Claire's voice trembled. "Ethan, what does this mean?" "Are they coming for you again?" Ethan's jaw clenched. his eyes on Shadow, who stood alert, sensing his tension. If they are, they'll regret it. Shadow and I aren't running anymore. The moment was shattered by a faint rustle in the nearby woods. Shadow's ears shot up, a growl rumbling as he stared into the trees. Ethan's hand went to his side, where his pistol would have been if he weren't off duty. "Stay here," he told Claire and Lila, whistling for Shadow to follow. The dog moved like a shadow, his training kicking in, leading Ethan to a clearing where a small, unmarked envelope lay on a stump, its edges crisp as if placed moments ago. Ethan's pulse raced. He opened it, finding a single flash drive and a note. "Phase 2 is alive. Trust no one." His blood ran cold. The tipster, or someone new, was back, and their timing was no coincidence. Shadow sniffed the envelope, his growl deepening, his nose pointing to a faint trail leading deeper into the woods. Ethan pocketed the drive, his mind racing. The sanctuary, his fresh start, was already under a shadow. "Ethan!" Lila's voice carried from the field, urgent. He sprinted back, Shadow at his heels, to find Lila staring at her laptop, her face pale. Someone just tried to hack the sanctuary's site. Military-grade encryption, same as Sentinel's. Claire clutched Ethan's arm, her voice breaking. "They know where we are, don't they?" Ethan's resolve hardened, his hand resting on Shadow's head. "Let 'em come. We've faced worse." But the flash drive in his pocket felt like a ticking bomb, its contents a mystery that could unravel everything they'd fought for. Shadow barked, his stance proud, as if vowing to stand with Ethan no matter what. Ethan looked at Claire, then Lila, his voice steady but emotional. "We built this place to heal, to give guys like me a chance. Shadow showed me that's possible. But if Sentinel's still out there, we're not done fighting." Claire nodded, her eyes fierce despite her fear. "We're with you, Ethan, all the way." Lila smirked, cracking her knuckles. "I've got a few tricks left. Let's see who's stupid enough to take us on." Ethan knelt beside Shadow, cupping the dog's face, his voice thick with gratitude. "You brought me back, buddy. Now, we're gonna finish this, together." Shadow's eyes met his, bright with loyalty, a silent promise that their bond was unbreakable. But as Ethan stood, a faint hum echoed from the woods, a drone, its red light blinking through the trees. The tipster's warning, "Trust no one," rang true, but a darker truth emerged. The flash drive wasn't just evidence. It was a lure, and Ethan had taken the bait. He looked out at the sanctuary, its promise of hope now tinged with danger, and spoke to the audience beyond the frame. "You've seen what Shadow and I went through," he said, his voice raw, compelling. "Loyalty kept us alive, through war, through betrayal. Who's been your shadow, standing by you when the world turned dark? Share your story with us." "Join this fight, because it's not over yet," Shadow barked, his tail wagging, a call to action that echoed across the field. Ethan's gaze hardened, the drone's hum growing louder, a chilling reminder that Sentinel's reach was far from broken. The Willow Creek K9 sanctuary glowed under a crisp Montana morning, its fields alive with the barks of rescue dogs and the laughter of veterans finding solace. Ethan Carter stood at the edge of the training yard, his rugged frame steady, his blue eyes softened by a hard-won peace. Shadow, his 4-year-old German shepherd, played nearby, chasing a ball with a vigor that belied his scars, his black and tan coat catching the sunlight. The Project Sentinel. Conspiracy, Dr. E. Harris, Colonel James Vaughn, Major General William Kane, lay in ruins, exposed to the world through Lila Brooks' relentless hacking. But the flash drive from the woods marked, Phase 2 is alive. Trust no one. Weighed heavy in Ethan's pocket, a chilling reminder that their victory was incomplete. Claire Harper, Ethan's sister, watched from a bench, her blonde hair loose, her nurse's instincts now channeled into the sanctuary's therapy programs. Her role as the tipster, guiding Ethan to dismantle Sentinel, had rebuilt their bond, though the scars of her silence lingered. Lila, the hacker, sat cross-legged on the grass, her laptop open, monitoring the sanctuary's growing online community. The world knew Sentinel's sins, canine experiments, human trials, but the unidentified official behind Phase 2 haunted Ethan, a shadow he couldn't outrun. Ethan tossed the ball, Shadow leaping to catch it, his bark ringing with joy. "That's my boy," Ethan called, a smile breaking through his weathered features. The sanctuary was his redemption, a place where broken soldiers and dogs like Shadow could heal. He walked to Claire, his limp faint now, his voice warm but tinged with caution. "This place, it's what we fought for, Claire. But I can't shake the feeling we're not done." Claire's eyes met his, her voice steady despite the worry lines on her face. "You and Shadow stopped a monster, Ethan. Whatever's left, we'll face it together." Ethan nodded, his hand brushing Shadow's fur as the dog returned, dropping the ball at his feet. "He brought me back, Claire. I was lost, but Shadow never gave up on me." Lila looked up, her voice sharp. "Ethan, we've got a problem." She turned her laptop, showing an encrypted email that had bypassed her firewalls. The subject, Sentinel Lives. Ethan's pulse quickened as Lila opened it, revealing a single line. "Phase 2. Activates soon. You can't stop the future." Attached was a photo. Ethan, Shadow, Claire, and Lila at the sanctuary, taken hours ago from a drone's high vantage. Ethan's blood ran cold, his hand tightening on Shadow's leash. "They're here," he said, his voice low, fierce. "Watching us." Claire stood, her face pale but resolute. "Ethan, what do we do? The FBI's got Kane, Harris. How are they still operating?" Lila's fingers flew across her keyboard, tracing the email's source. "It's a ghost server, military grade." "Whoever this is, they're not just Sentinel. They're the puppet master." Shadow growled, his ears perked, his nose sniffing the air. Ethan followed his gaze to the tree line, where a faint glint betrayed a hidden lens. "Drone," he muttered, grabbing his pistol from a nearby bag. He fired, the shot echoing as the drone crashed in a shower of sparks. Shadow barked, ready to charge, his instincts honed by their battles. "Ethan!" Lila shouted, her screen flashing a new alert. A live feed from the drone's wreckage, showing a man in a suit, his face obscured, speaking into a radio. "Carter's onto us. Accelerate Phase 2. The feed cut off, but the man's voice was chillingly familiar, a ghost from Ethan's past he couldn't place. Ethan's mind raced, the twist hitting like a shockwave. This wasn't just a remnant of Sentinel. It was a new beast, led by someone who knew him, who'd watched him rebuild his life only to strike again. "Lila, can you trace him?" Ethan asked, his voice urgent. "Trying," Lila said, her face grim. "But he's buried deep, Pentagon-level deep." Claire grabbed Ethan's arm, her voice breaking. "Ethan, they're coming for Shadow, aren't they? After everything, they won't let him go." Ethan's eyes locked on Shadow, the dog's fierce gaze anchoring him. "They'll have to go through me first," he said, his voice a vow. He knelt beside Shadow, cupping his face, his heart full. "You're my partner, boy. No one's taking you again." Shadow nuzzled his hand, a whine of loyalty that spoke louder than words. Ethan stood, his resolve unbreakable, but the flash drive's warning, "Trust no one," gnawed at him. The sanctuary, their haven, was a target, and the enemy was closer than ever. He turned to Lila and Claire, his voice steady but emotional. "We've got a fight ahead, but we've beaten worse. Shadow showed me what's possible. Loyalty, hope, a second chance. We're not letting that go." Lila grinned, shutting her laptop. "Let's hunt this bastard down, Carter. I'm in." Claire hugged Ethan, her voice fierce. "We're family, Ethan. Whatever comes, we face it together." A new drone hummed in the distance, its red light blinking through the clouds. Ethan's hand rested on Shadow's head, the dog's growl a promise of defiance. "They think they can break us," Ethan said, his voice rising, "but they don't know what we're made of." He faced the audience, breaking the fourth wall, his gaze piercing. "You've seen our story, Shadow and me, through war, betrayal, and back again. Loyalty kept us standing. Who's been your shadow, your rock when the world turned dark? Share it with us. Join this fight, because we're not done yet." Shadow barked, his tail wagging, a call that resonated across the field. A host stepped into view, her voice warm, urgent. Ethan and Shadow's journey shows the power of unbreakable bonds. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop your stories in the comments. Your support fuels these stories of courage and loyalty. Join our community. Let's keep the fight alive. As the host faded, Ethan, Claire, Lila, and Shadow stood together, the drone's hum growing louder. Ethan pocketed the flash drive, its secrets a ticking clock. The camera lingered on Shadow, his eyes bright with purpose, then panned to Ethan, his face etched with determination. But in the sanctuary's office, unnoticed, a hidden camera blinked, its feed streaming to a dark room where a shadowed figure watched, their voice a chilling whisper. "Phase 2 begins now, Carter." The screen went black, leaving a spine-chilling promise that Sentinel's true master was only beginning to play their hand.